I didn't mean to do it. I thought I was dreaming, the temporary escape from the day-to-day drudgery of my life. It was average, at best. My dreams have always been expressive and filled with imagery. I dream in color, and it feels as though I'm experiencing whatever is happening. The freedom to go anywhere I wanted to was always fun. I'd float in the clouds, in the stars, and see images of the past, present, and future. I was sure they were nothing but imagination, coupled with dreams. During the daytime, I would take a nap, and I floated through the sky, moving through the clouds until I came somewhere that got my attention. A single home. It was warm, whilst everywhere else was cold to the touch. It was a quiet suburban home, with a well-kept yard, and a large yellow Labrador that barked defensively when I came too close. It certainly wasn't a mansion, and looked pretty average. Still, it was incredibly inviting. I peeked through the front windows. I saw a family settling in to watch a movie, with popcorn, while they casually doom-scrolled on their phones, while chatting to each other. None of them noticed me. This was the first time I'd seen anyone else here, while I was in this form, and I wondered whether I was making the right decision. I went to the front door. I couldn't see any symbols or signs that I should leave, nor was there any welcome mat sign. It was large, with a reddish-brown gold door knocker on it. Above the doorknob, I rested my fingertips against the door and expected to feel resistance. None. Once I realized I could go through it, I simply decided to step inside. Nothing felt any different. I looked down the hallway. No members of the family were alerted to my presence, and I crept slowly toward them, hiding behind the lounge. I heard a low grumble from the hallway when I came in. Slowly I turned, and saw glowing eyes from the hallway, watching me. I gulped, backed away toward the door, to ready myself to escape, when the beast stood well above me. It resembled a werewolf. At least, that's the closest thing it looked like. It walked toward me, sniffed the air close to my face, and I leaned back on the front door. This time, not being able to move through it, I waited and wondered what would happen to my body back home. Would I die? It must have decided I wasn't a threat, because it went back down the hallway, close to a small statue, and disappeared. The relief was incredible, and I felt like I could move once more. I noticed a small girl watching me from the doorway of her room. She looked stunned, curious, and I tried to wave at her. When we both made eye contact, she jumped backward and hid behind her toy box, crammed with a variety of toys, teddy bears and dolls, scared of who I was and why I was here. I don't know what or why it happened. I faded back to my real life and woke up from my nap. I wasn't sure what happened in the dream. Maybe I overslept? I worked late and didn't have time for it any other days during the week. I couldn't stop thinking about that family, even the strange guardian creature, and I wondered what they were doing, if they were okay, etc. A holiday was coming up, and instead of doing something, I decided I would nap and see if I could find them again. I was excited when I got my chance. My routine was simple: eat, go to the toilet, wash, and then burn a scented candle to set the mood. I couldn't remember what kind it was, and some meditation time. It was midday, on a warm sunny day, and I curled up for my cat nap. I soon felt myself slip away from this reality into another. I tried to remember how to go back to that home that had been so incredibly cozy. I floated through the world, avoiding the chilled parts, focusing on finding the place I felt so incredibly relaxed. And I found it, like a faint golden glow, compared to nothing but washed out grey. I came back to the house and landed outside. My bare feet touched the grass, and it looked exactly the same. I entered yet again, and walked down the hallway, this time getting close to the lounge room, and the kitchen, where the mother was humming to herself while baking. I could smell the warm cookies. My mother never baked. It was so incredibly homely. I couldn't see any of the children, and I guess the husband was at work. I watched, tempted to go and sit on one of the bar stools in front of the kitchen island, just to feel part of it, to have a family. She stopped, looked in my direction, and I could have sworn she knew I was there. Her lips gave a subdued smile and continued using her rolling pin. I stayed where I was, simply enjoying the atmosphere, until I saw my reflection in the glass microwave door. It was distorted, twisted, with the features brushed over, like a watercolor painting. I did my best to ignore it, purposely avoiding looking at my reflection in the future. I watched her work, and not wishing to intrude any more than I had been. The humming and cozy atmosphere reminded me of what I was missing in my own life. Eventually, I faded away, being drawn back to my body, and I always felt happy after being there. In the coming weeks, I ended up setting aside time in my day to go and visit this family on the opposite side of the planet. I'd watch as they'd experience the highs and lows of their family life. I watched them throughout the years. Over time, I realized they must have known I was there. I became the house ghost, a welcome guest, and they would speak to me sometimes, greeting me, asking me if I was okay. And while I struggled to communicate with them, I never felt unwelcome. One time, the eldest daughter and her friends tried to speak with me, asking me how I died and what happened to me. I'm not dead. Although the gesture was nice, I saw birthdays, the eldest daughter go through a breakup with her boyfriend, and trivial smaller fights within the family. Typical family life. I got the impression sometimes they knew I was there watching them, especially from the youngest daughter and the mother. Whenever I would arrive, the feeling immediately outside the home became different, and I felt claustrophobic, as though there were many people standing outside, waiting to enter. I never lingered outside anymore. Things changed months later, when the grandmother moved in. After a fall that resulted in a hospital visit, the study was changed into a new bedroom. Boxes of items were moved to the garage, or placed in other storage. She was small. Her body shrank with age, with short grey curls on her head, and always wore her pink bathrobe, with bunny rabbit slippers on her feet. I didn't think she could see me at first. I watched as she would greet her family with a kind smile, and had an attitude that left no prisoners. Out of the blue one day, "Stop creeping round corners. What are you, some kind of weirdo?" she demanded, and reached for her walking stick, and I would have offered to help her, but she was fussing over the bandage around her ankle, possibly irritated she had lost some of her independence. I jumped, surprised and gulped, stepped in front of her, and she reached over to her bedside table, put on her large, circular glasses that made her eyes look enormous. She rubbed her eyes, blinked a couple of times, and leaned forward to study me further. "Well, I'll be." She chuckled, coughed and reached out to grab a cup of water, sipped it, rubbed her chest, with yet another cough. "I'll be damned. You're not dead." She was the first one he knew. I'm sure her daughter had suspicions, but she knew for sure. I felt guilty having deceived the family. But would they have been okay with a living person making their way through their home? I tried to answer, thinking of an explanation. "Stop standing there with your mouth open like a fish," she called out, irritated. "I'm not going to bite. Here, wait," she murmured, low, and it was difficult to hear her. I walked into her room and stood close by watching, unable to physically help her, and I doubted her independent spirit would have wanted it. Helping herself into the wheelchair, she used it to wheel herself over to a cardboard box and opened it up. It was filled with old and new books. Let me see. I'm sure I have something on it." She rummaged around. The organized piles inside soon became a cluttered mess. She beamed once the right one was found, flicked through the unruly pages, and finally, flicking through the pages until she found the correct one. Her finger ran over the paragraphs and rested at the bottom one. Her finger tapped against it a couple of times so I could understand. "Ah,
Here we go. Astral projection. That's what you're doing. Still alive but in a dreamlike state.
She held open the book and pushed it toward me. I couldn't take it with my hands. Not that I ever really tried to use them here. And she held it out for me to read. The image had a figure floating above the world, moving through cities, and had a ghostly appearance. On the opposite page was a picture of someone lying down, sleeping. What I imagined my body looked like back home. Astral projection, the art of traveling in a dreamlike state. It allows people to move past their bodies and develops through practice. I read out loud, but interrupted myself to ask, "How did you know I wasn't a ghost?" She closed the door to give us some privacy, sighed and shrugged her hunched shoulders dismissively.
Oh, a gift. The family eye. Now, you can't spend too much time here.
I like it here. It's so peaceful and...
No. This isn't your life. You're supposed to learn your lesson and move on. Every time you visit our home, you bring more attention to us, let alone your body back home. Coming here rather than living your life is unwise, she grumbled.
I never thought of it that way. I enjoyed coming to see the family, watching their lives, and simply being in their presence. I spent more time here than I did with my family and friends. She stopped, her eyes wide in the glasses frame, and paused as though listening to something. There were shadows around the windows, trying to peek in. Occasionally they tapped the glass, trying to find a way inside. I let out a yell of surprise. I didn't expect this. I opened my mouth to ask her what they were, when she raised her hand. I'm not sure whether she did something, or my energy simply ran out. I woke up back in my body and panted heavily. My chest felt tight, as though something had been sitting on me. Normally, it was a gentle, slow process when I came back to reality. My room was dark. I picked up my phone and saw it was 10 p.m. I was over there much later than I thought. I got up and went to wash my face, before browsing the fridge to see if there was anything tasty to snack on. There was food. Naturally, I would have preferred something quick and tasty. I closed the door, rather than get something to eat, and tried to find something to entertain myself. I felt numb. I turned on the TV and flicked through the different movies, trying to find something to watch or do. Nothing caught my eye. For a fortnight, I decided not to try to visit them again, and thought more of what happened. Maybe it was all a dream, and this was my subconscious's way of telling me to get a life. I miss the family, even the fussy old grandma. I set aside some time on my day off. Perhaps I'd get a chance to sneak inside and take just a quick look. It couldn't hurt, and I could always leave without going in to see them. I relaxed on my bed, hands gently folded on my stomach, and I felt myself slip into the dream world. It's hard to describe. The closest thing I can compare it to is floating or flying. I tried to find the home, the warmth I craved, and tried to seek it out in the massed clouds of grey. All the homes looked the same. There was nothing to draw my eye. I nearly gave up hope when I caught the sight of the light. That same warmth I remembered. I beamed and floated down there, landing gently on the grass. I expected to go through the front door, but found myself being pushed backward. It was the first time. I couldn't see it, but there was something the doorway had that prevented my entrance. I tried to step through, and kept feeling myself being pushed back. I did the only thing I could, and peered through the window. They were seated together in front of the TV, exactly the same as when I first saw them, and I rested my hands on the glass, trying to get a better look inside. I hoped either the mother or the little one would see me. Maybe they could tell me I could come in. They were too wrapped up in their video game to notice me. I knew the grandma had to have done something to keep me out. I wasn't going to hurt anyone. I know a way in. I heard the whisper behind me. When I turned to look, whatever spoke was gone, and I kept searching for whoever it was. I figured perhaps I must have heard the radio, or the TV back home. My gaze returned to the family. Only this time, the protective beast from before watched me through the glass and glared at me. The yellow eyes glowed, teeth bared, and I got a better view of those sharp, dark claws on its hands. The family didn't see the spirit creature. They were completely oblivious to it, and were busy having their casual conversation among themselves. It took up nearly the entire window space. I knew I was no longer welcome, yet I didn't expect whatever it was to become so vicious. Over the years, I would visit the family. I would see the eye of the statue twinkle, and that was it. I felt a tug on my hand and turned to see a small child, a young boy, barely 4 years old. He wore tattered pajamas and carried an old teddy bear that had both eyes removed. He stared up at me with large pale eyes, and so far, I hadn't seen any other astral spirits or people here with me. He looked like the images from the book, and nor did he resemble any shadows. Perhaps he would also occasionally visit the family. "Hey there, are you lost?" He nodded, his grip on his teddy so tight that the stuffing bulged trying to escape. During my indecision, he tightened his grip on my hand and moved closer to me. The beast inside the home growled violently, and instinctively, I pulled him close to protect him from it. I heard a faint voice, but couldn't understand what it was saying. "It's okay. I won't let it get you," I comforted him. He was gripping me so tight now it hurt. Hey, it's okay. Stop, it's too... Carol!" I could barely make it out. What was that? It repeated a couple of times, faint and barely there. I heard my mum calling me, her voice echoing in the world with my body. Shit, I forgot she was going to come over. He looked as though he was going to say something. He smiled at me, and his grip got tighter. I tried to push him off. "Carol!" I was yanked back into my body when my mum shook my shoulder. I awoke with a start, gasping, and she put her hands up in an apology. "I'm sorry. I told you I was coming. You can't lay in bed all day." She looked down at me in disgust, her top lip curled, and her fingertip ran along the surface of the bedhead to collect the dust. They rubbed together and allowed the small pieces to fall to the floor. She turned on my bedside table lamp to wake me up, and it was sharp coming back like this. The first time something in the real world had done so. I groaned at her. Every limb felt heavy, and rubbed my eyes to clear them. "What time is it?" I groaned. 3 p.m. She walked, nearly tripping on the random items on the floor. "How is it so cold in here?" she criticized, allowing the late afternoon sun to enter my room. It was brighter than I expected. I used my arms to shield my eyes, and sat up, my feet on the floor, and rested my face in my hands. I thought of the small boy I saw outside, and how I was no longer welcome at the house. I wondered if he managed to find his own way home. Now away from them and in my own world, I wanted to respect their wishes. I couldn't go back, and maybe I was drawing other beings to them. They clearly didn't want me there, and the beast creature would hurt me if I returned. Maybe that was what the grandma was trying to warn me about. I got up and ate dinner with my mother and my 2 siblings. They chatted around me, but I wasn't listening to the conversation. I wanted to be anywhere but here. I was thinking about my other family. Were they okay? What if that creature was going to hurt them? I hated the idea of not being able to do something. The next day, my mother kept calling or texting me. I think she was trying to stop me from napping during the day. Finally, she must have been distracted with something else, because calls and messages went back to normal, and I was going to try to visit them again. Since I wasn't allowed inside, perhaps I could warn them from outside the window. It felt wrong to do nothing. I relaxed on my bed and felt myself drift back. The house seemed the same, not as vibrant as it was previously, and I was worried. It was such a sharp comparison to the place I had found. I peered in through the large lounge room window, and I couldn't see anyone inside. The car wasn't in the garage, and while I couldn't see inside the garage, they had never stored their car in there before. I walked through the side gate, even though I felt as though I was being pushed back, when I heard a whisper. "I know a way you can get in." I jumped, expecting to see someone around me, and found no one. "Hello?" "See those rocks with the lines drawn on them?" I looked and saw them. They nearly blended in with the plants in the garden bed, and you wouldn't see them unless you were looking for them. Throw them away. Break them. Do whatever you can to get rid of them. I stared down at them, leaned down, and something felt wrong. There were markings I didn't recognize on them. I wasn't even sure if I'd be able to lift them either. I didn't like the idea of damaging someone else's property. Do you want them to get hurt? Quick. You must do it now, the voice hissed, demandingly. I rushed to lift it up. It didn't burn me per se, but it was heavier than I thought, and only grew heavier. I can barely move it. I winced. I couldn't escape the uneasy feeling in my stomach. I tossed it to one side nearby. Who are you? I called out to the empty space. You must get the others. The beast will attack the family soon. You don't have much time. I looked through the window and saw a black shadow figure lingering around, and it moved into the shadow behind one of the chests of drawers, concealing itself in an everyday item. I knew I couldn't waste any time now. I waved my hands and shouted for them to notice me at the top of my lungs. None of them moved. The shadow was eerily creeping toward the children playing, and I knew I had to act swiftly. I heard the Labradors bark, more hostile and defensive this time. The real-world guardian's bark went silent, and a loud yelp boomed throughout the world. I dreaded what happened to it. All I found was a bloody pool, with a dog's brown leather collar lying on the grass. Where's the next one? I called out, hurrying. The voice picked the worst time not to say anything. It only increased my feeling of panic. I could feel my heart rate increase inside my body. It was loud and I hated the feeling. Go to the front door. Take the items off it and you can enter. I went back to the door. It no longer looked warm and inviting. There were small salt lines, nearly missable, and smaller containers filled with random items close by. Why hadn't I noticed any of these before? Or were they new? Pick them up and throw them away. I missed the family, and I hated not being welcome anymore. But this, what are they trying to keep out? I don't remember that. Do it now! I received an uncomfortable chill for my complaints, and knew what I was doing was wrong. The grey went darker. The outline of the other homes faded, and the shadowy figures watched me from their windows. Inside, I heard the guardian beast cry out, as the dark being started to tear it apart. It howled in pain, and the statue broke into pieces. The items fell on the floor. The family began screaming. They pushed their fingertips into their skulls and ripped out their eyeballs, thrashing around and running into walls, in pure panic, without their guardian to protect them. Even the grandma was taken unaware. Her movements were the most jerky, and it took the longest for her to succumb. Her eyebrows narrowed, and a look of pure venom in her eyes. She raised her hand, fingers twisted, and screamed as they penetrated her eyes. The entity let out a wicked, howling laugh at the family through my mouth. I couldn't believe I did this. I backed away, trying to get back to my body, and it didn't work. The small boy appeared, this time with a twisted, inhuman leer. His black, lidless eyes peered at me, never moving, and I could see my frightened reflection in them. The teddy bear was no longer an innocent and beloved toy. It was now rotted completely, an innocent mask for something much more terrible. The reflection showed I was becoming a shadow, the same as those that attacked the family, and I couldn't. I refused to be one of them. I didn't have much time. Again, I tried to get back to my body. Since I couldn't go back, I tried something else. I ran up to the door, knocking as hard as I could, and crying to be let in. I promised never to return, to please not let it take me. At the final moment the door opened, and I fell through. The grandma threw something at the entity, and it disappeared before bringing me inside. She was dead, yet even in death, her spirit remained strong, unwilling to turn, and also protected her family. She looked down at me, critically, and her eyes were shot with agitation before they softened. I wish you had have listened to me. You need to get back to your body. Now. I can't. I saw something in here. A shadow figure. What happened? Is the family okay? She raised a grey, bushy eyebrow in skepticism.
Nothing can get in here. It can't hurt us now. We're dead. It must be on your end.
What? The outline of a shadow figure moved across the walls, hiding behind one item before moving to the next one, and I felt like I was being surrounded. My chest was crushed and my throat felt tight, with nowhere to run. She raised her hand to my forehead and said a word I didn't recognize. I was sent back into my body. My back arched, and I gasped loudly for breath. I choked and struggled to breathe. A figure was sitting on my chest, grinning maliciously down at me. The boy I saw at the house had come back with me, an unwanted visitor. I couldn't move yet. Was this it? It stared down into my eyes, and again I saw my reflection. It tricked me. When it leaned down, I felt like I was going to die.
You're gonna let me go inside the house. Next, you will help me enter every home in both worlds. If you do, I will leave you alone and never bother you again.
I didn't believe it. The entity had already deceived me, and at least I could trust that it was dishonest.
I will get in either way, and I can always go after your family instead.
I'm not gonna help you. I'm not. The figure held their hands over my eyes, pressed down hard, and I could feel their body move. There was a whispered word that I couldn't recognize, and I was pushed back into the astral plane. This time, it wasn't the smooth transition I was used to, and I fell to the ground, hard. Usually I felt like I was floating, happy and carefree here. I felt heavy. I reached back and felt the black leech-like limbs down my arms. I reached to my neck, and it was wrapped around there too. Its head molded around mine like a helmet, clinging to me, and instinctively I pulled on it. My body no longer my own. I couldn't float anymore. I floundered around as the pair of us battled for control. Finally, I could no longer move as I willed. I could only watch while it moved closer to the front door. This time it made a hiss. The door had more markings and it couldn't enter. Inside the house had the same furniture, and all it was missing was the people. It moved to the back door. The same thing happened there also. I thought they may have moved, perhaps hoped it would be the case. I heard the idle chatter from the porch, and saw the grandma and the siblings all standing together. Despite being dead, they were enjoying their time together. The youngest child noticed us first, and stared fearfully, while the other children had goosebumps and wrapped their arms around their chests. Even in death, some were more gifted than others. The elderly woman gave me a sad, resigned look, and I figured she knew what could happen. She was fearless, and led the children past us, into the safety of their home. Even when the door was open, I couldn't step over the threshold.
Let us in. Now.
My lips moved. Now I was unable to control them. I could see images of scenes the entity was sending each of them. Separate visions of torture. All but one was immune. One of the children saw their mother being strangled outside. A false vision, and she would die if they did not let us in. Their mother saw each of her children being stabbed, all of them unaware they were in death's grasp. And since they died here, rather than in the real world, their spirits were trapped. They didn't understand how they were dead yet. Silently she thought of the invitation, and the spell protecting the house broke. The shield lowered. Before the grandma could fix it, my fingers moved through the door. I regained ability, and started to walk inside. The home no longer had the same warm atmosphere. It felt empty, isolated. The eyeless family stood calmly in the face of that terror. Once we made our way inside, I screamed inside the entity, trying to regain control and apologizing repeatedly for what I had done. I hated myself for it. The grandma raised her hand. A bright light circled the family, and soon they disappeared. I don't know where they went. I can only assume they went to heaven or some other paradise. You're stronger than it. You're stronger than it. I heard in my mind. It wasn't the grandma's voice, or any other I recognized either. Perhaps it was me. A touch of the divine. I don't know. I kept fighting the entity. However, the pair of us were both evenly matched. Whatever it would try to hunt, I would be there, and my whispers would warn people to stay away. Some would heed my warning, and others would join the ranks of the shadow people. It was my bane, and so, naturally I became its own. Sometimes, it would attempt to flee from me, only for me to cling on, forcing it to endure me, and I'll whisper how it fooled me. One time, I managed to get it to cry, and break down so much, the boy returned, only for me to disregard the screams. I wander the astral plane, a keeper and protector to some, and a demon to others. I hope you enjoy this story. What did you think of it? Let me know what you thought in the comments section down below. Don't forget to stab the like button, subscribe, hit the bell and leave a comment. This video is made with the support of my incredible channel members, Patreon subscribers, and all my viewers. Thank you so much for supporting me. Don't forget to check out my social media accounts below, including my merch. Stay safe, my little spooklings. And remember, I'll be watching you.